1 year ago today, on January 11th, 2024, Bang Bravern premiered and took the Mecha and Super Robot fandom by storm. I didn't watch it at the time it was airing, but over the past week, I've caught up with it and I've watched all 12 episodes for the very first time. So what did I think of it? How does it hold up 1 year later? Is it as good as people made it out to be? Let's talk about it. But before we dive into it, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe if you are a fan of Mecha anime content and want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. And also head on down to the comments section below, let me know your thoughts on this series if you've seen it, or are you going to go out and watch it right after this review. In fact, I do have a quick disclaimer. If you haven't watched the first episode in particular, click off this video, go watch that first episode and then come back to it, because there are things that happen towards the end of that first episode which kind of spoiled the series. I think a lot of people will probably know what it is by now, but generally if you don't know much about this series or anything for that matter, it is well worth going into it completely blind, definitely for the first episode anyway, and then like I said, you can come back and watch this review. I'm not going to dive too deep into spoilers for the rest of the series, but there are things that happen in that first episode where it's hard to talk about the rest of the series without referencing that. I'm going to give you a countdown of 3 seconds to click off this video, go watch that episode and come back here. So right out of the gate, I absolutely love the bait and switch premiere episode of this series, because it sets itself up, and it did exactly the same thing in the trailers, where it sets itself up as a real robot series initially. Then about halfway into the first episode, it kind of transitions into like a dark alien invasion story where humanity's hope is all but lost, and then at the end of the episode, you basically make it this very cheesy super robot series. And I love the way that it balances all three of those. It's wild because in 20 minutes it manages to accomplish like 3 vastly different series. It does so many different things in that first episode without ever feeling messy or feeling like it's doing too much or trying to do too much. It somehow all works together in tandem, where it nicely flows from one bit into another, but also feels very sudden in the changes that it makes. It's a really well crafted first episode, and I've got to give it props for that. Beyond that first episode though, the energy of this show is dialed up to 11. This is such an over exaggerated series that is genuinely hilarious. Like the first, I want to say 5 episodes in particular, are just comedy gold. It is so funny, and even if you are not like a diehard fan of this kind of genre, or you are very unfamiliar with it, it's comedy that works on a level where it is poking fun at those tropes, but it's also just comedy that works anyway, and it's just very funny. It's so heavily driven by innuendos, but those innuendos are so like in your face obvious that it's not trying to be subtle. This is like the furthest thing from a subtly comedic show. It goes all out. It's not quite slapstick, but it's in that realm of like, this is obviously comedy, and it's trying to be comedy. I think that those first 5 episodes, or probably the first half of the series in particular, is so well written comedically that it is probably one of the funniest shows I've seen recently. The funniest moments and lines of dialogue are mostly given to Bravern, Isami, and Lewis Smith, but there's so many like side characters and supporting characters in this series that have great moments of comedy and almost have their own little subgenre of comedy in and of themselves. You got this commander guy who is generally very serious military commander, but he's kind of just hearing out a lot of the stuff that Bravern says, and he's like, what is going on here? And there's a lot of like more deadpan comedy that comes from that. But you also have some of the supporting female characters in particular that are like hyper focused on certain aspects of the way that guys talk or things like that. It's strange, but like everyone has those little bits of comedy that really work for them, and they kind of add life to those supporting characters and make them more memorable than they would otherwise be. And I think regardless of whether Bang Bravern works for you on a comedic level, you've got to respect how balls to the wall and so over exaggerated it can be, because it knows what it's trying to be. It knows it wants to be that thing. And as soon as a story or a script or a creative dedicates their work to this specific tone or this specific idea and goes all out on that, it usually works. They know what they're getting into. They know what they're making. The characters know what they are kind of trying to portray in a way. And as soon as they can nail that down, and as soon as they are fully committed to that idea, that's when you get the best kind of storytelling and the best kind of entertainment. And that's exactly what Bang Bravern delivers, definitely for the first half though. It is a series that very much swings for the fences in terms of tone, comedy, action, general absurdity, but also the plot. And that's where we get into some of the stuff that didn't quite work for me. I loved everything this series was doing for like the first 2/3 of it. It gets to episode 8, something happens at the end of that episode, and then we go into episode 9, and they kind of do some things there. Like I said, I'm not going to fully dive into spoilers, but for those that have seen the series, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a very big decision made that recontextualizes a lot of things, and whilst I respect them making that twist and kind of going this direction of you're not expecting this kind of thing to happen, it didn't 100% work for me. Now, it didn't ruin the show for me, and I know for a lot of people, it would have just straight up killed the show. For me personally, I look back on the first 2/3 of the show, and I still really enjoy it. I still enjoy the other third, but there's a massive decision made that didn't work for me 100% on a character and story level. I don't outright hate it. Like I said, it doesn't ruin the show, but it's a decision that I personally wouldn't have made, and I feel like the series was far better prior to that decision being made, and if they didn't make that decision, I feel like the last third would have been a lot stronger. As we get closer and closer to the end of the series, a lot of what they do in trying to poke fun and over-exaggerate tropes results in them playing into those exact tropes. A lot of movies or series or anime or games that frame themselves as being like a parody of a certain genre do tend to do this sometimes, where they think that they are poking fun at these tropes by essentially just becoming them, and thus they are just becoming them. You know, it feels like a lazy way of being like, okay, we're going to be different because we are self-aware, but they're not being different. They're not doing anything different. They're simply letting those tropes play out while saying, we're aware these tropes are playing out, but we're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to leave it and let it play out as it is. And to me, that's really lazy writing in terms of doing a parody, because like I said, the first 2/3 of this series I think are really strong in terms of writing and being, you know, self-aware and parodying, but also feeling unique and feeling very much like their own thing. And then you get into that back third and it feels kind of the opposite of that, where it's parodying, it's self-aware, but it's not being different, it's just being the exact same thing. Before I get into my final thoughts though, I want to give some more positive things, because I feel like I was a little bit too negative on it there, when I'm generally not. Like, for the most part, I am pretty positive on this series, and I've got to say the animation is really good. Uses CGI for the mechs, but it works. The action is really exciting. It delivers the kind of super robot action you expect, but it just generally looks good. And the 2D animation stuff also does really look good as well. I mean, Cygames probably had a decent budget behind this. I think generally they're quite a big company, and they generally tend to make really good things. Shout out to the opening and ending though, those two things are fantastic. The opening is essentially what you would expect from super robot, over-exaggerated openings, I guess. Like, it's the kind of thing you would expect, but it's really catchy, and visuals great, and all that kind of stuff. It delivers the kind of opening you would want from these shows. Then you get into the ending, and it's essentially like a really dramatic, romantic, yaoi ending where two lead characters are like taking their shirts off and singing to each other and interlocking hands. It's kind of funny, but also it's catchy, and the song is actually genuinely really good. I gotta respect it. A wildly different opening to its ending, but both of them are great in their own terms. But overall, despite my issues and disagreements with some of the decisions made in the last third of this series, I still found that last third entertaining, and the first 2/3 I thought were fantastic. Everything about those first 2/3 of this series I loved, from the comedy, the action, the characterization, the general absurdity and over-exaggeration of everything, I thought was downright perfect. I love those first 2/3. And I still like the last third. But if that last third was stronger than it was, this could have been a near perfect series. And even with that said, it is probably still my favourite mecha anime series of 2024. So as for whether it lived up to the hype and the expectations, I would generally say yes. I had a great time with this, and even if you don't like the decisions made in the last third of this series, I think you will appreciate and just thoroughly enjoy the time you have with those first 2/3, because they're very, very fun, and I have no doubt that anyone who watches this series, whether you're a diehard fan of this genre or you've never seen it in your life, you are probably going to have a good time with this, because I think it's very easily accessible to just about anyone, and it's probably going to be very entertaining to just about anyone as well. So with all that in mind, I'm going to give Bang Bravern a B. But those are my thoughts on Bang Bravern. Before I get out there, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe. If you are a fan of Mecha anime content, I want to see plenty more videos like this in the future. And like I did say earlier, head on down to the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts on this series if you have seen it. Who's your favourite character? What was your favourite episode? Was there a particular comedic bit that you liked the most? And also stay tuned, because now I've seen every single 2024 Mecha anime series that did release, so I can finally rank them all from worst to best. So that video will be coming hopefully next week. Thank you once again for tuning in to Mecha Chat today. I'll see you guys next time.